Let's talk some vibrato. So, vibrato is one of these things that plagues teachers and students alike, and it's my belief that this is one of the more, if not the most, difficult thing to teach on the instrument. And I believe it's because of how many moving parts we are introducing to the equation. You know, in basic cello playing, before we learn vibrato, you're really not moving a lot of small stuff around so much. I mean, sure, you're moving your fingers, but just basic shifting. You're not really changing a lot of angles. The bow, similarly, when we first start out, I'm just kind of moving big things up here, right? As we become more advanced, we start to incorporate some flexibility into the bow. Just like with vibrato, as we become more advanced, we start incorporating vibrato and we start moving around a lot more things. That becomes very difficult to intellectualize everything you're moving. There's literally hundreds of bones in the hand and all that kind of thing. So there's a little bit of magic involved when it comes to vibrato. It is my belief it can't entirely be taught, and there's a huge range of natural ability from student to student when it comes to being able to do vibrato, and it doesn't even necessarily correspond to whether this is a student who generally gets things quickly and works hard and is a quick learner. Sometimes students just sort of have this sort of vibrato as their natural default move, yeah? That sort of thing. And if you're watching this video, you might be here because you're that student. So anyhow, let me just get into a few things that I've found help some of my students improve upon their vibrato. So let's start with the basic movements that we're going to be dealing with in the vibrato. I really break it down to two main moves. One is the elbow opening and closing. The other is, there is some time, not everybody has a lot of this, but some people have some twist in the wrist here. And again, that's simply a rotation of the forearm sort of in the socket. At no point is the position of my elbow changing when I'm doing vibrato, whether I'm doing more of a twisty vibrato or whether I'm doing more of an arm vibrato. My elbow stays in the same place. I'm not doing something like, I'm not moving my shoulder around. Another thing with vibrato is the wrist really isn't going to break much, whether I'm sort of twisting or whether I'm doing more of an arm vibrato. My wrist stays fairly firm. Even in the twisting, I'm not moving my wrist really as much as I'm rotating my arm a bit. Now, I'm sure some of you have heard or been told, watch out for the twisting. Yeah, if you're just twisting, that's kind of wrong. Like, you shouldn't be... That would be a pure arm twist. Now, that might sound better than this. Right? It can actually be made to sound pretty good if your speed and width are correct, although it does sound a little bit wow, 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 right? That's kind of what it's criticized for, this kind of twisty vibrato. You know, the origin of vibrato really should be in this movement right here, okay? That's like, I guess we call it like an arm sweep, or it's really the elbow joint opening and closing. Now, considering even for a wide range of motion, I don't have to move this very much to get this to move pretty far. It's the concept of like a lever, right? I move a little bit here, my hand travels a lot more than I'm moving here. I can travel a foot by just opening my elbow slightly. So we don't actually need a lot of this movement, although that's what makes this difficult. if you're not doing much of it, it's easy to lose track that it's happening at all. And it's very easy for the vibrato to just revert into something like this, where this motion is not taking place. So, you know, oftentimes vibrato is taught in this way, sort of light pressure on the string, maybe your second finger. I'm going to aim for second position, second finger G here on the D string, right? And I'm going to kind of be to either side of it, and I'm going to get narrower and narrower and narrower. This is often the first way vibrato is introduced or taught. There's a bit of an issue with this, and the issue is this. So, oh, don't twist your arm. This is often to help people not twist, yeah? Okay, and then just get smaller and smaller, and then bang, all of a sudden you're doing vibrato. Now, the problem is, what I was doing was sliding up and down on the string. I wasn't twisting, or even my finger wasn't flexing in any way. Well, if I get smaller, what's moving when I stop? If I were to actually keep my hand firm and continue this motion, I would literally be picking my cello up and down eventually. Something has to give, literally, for me to continue making this motion, yet stay in the same place. Well, either I'm sliding on the string or the cello's coming with me. Those are the two options. The third option, which is actually what's happening, is you're doing something like rolling over the finger, because the finger is now stationary. So something has to move, right? Either I'm rolling over my finger, which is a bit of this, although it's powered by this, right? Or the finger. There's some play in the finger itself. Now that doesn't mean I'm actively moving my finger. It's more of a follow through of the finger. So for instance, my fingers are moving right now, but I'm not moving my fingers. My fingers are moving now, and I am moving my fingers, right? So it's like a whip or a follow through. Something has to move. So incorporating both this and this movement, it's, I think, a good idea to just get on the note. And I like using second and third position for vibrato, because when we're first learning it, if we're back here, it's a little awkward to feel the move that you're trying to make because you're kind of behind your head. If we're down here, we can start running into a limitation on our range of motion. Although I've used fourth position to teach vibrato because it actually gives you a bit of a gauge how far, whether you're moving, how far you're going. You can kind of feel where you're at. So that can be used as a tool as well, and we can get into that further later. But let's stick in second or third position here. D string, kind of right down the middle of the instrument. And I think first maybe feel, second or first finger here, feel just a pure twist. We're not going to open and close this at all. And again, this is not what you want to do exclusively, but it very well may be part of your move. So my range of motion in a twist has me hitting my first, if I'm on my second finger, has me hitting my first finger, tip back, and hitting my fourth finger. That's my range. Obviously I'm not going that far. I'm going a little bit less far than that, so that doesn't happen. Yeah, that's a pure twist. I'm not moving the arm at all, yeah? So that's the range of the swing in my mind. The engine has to come from here. So it's really incorporating, combining two movements. Okay, and the way I like to explain it is this. I have a cup of coffee here, okay? Without opening and closing my elbow whatsoever, I can take a drink of it or I can spill it out on the floor. That's the twist move, okay? Take a drink, spill it out. I can also hold the cup and just move it around like this. Wouldn't be a good idea, there'd be coffee everywhere. But that's the opening and closing of the arm, no twist. What I want to do is incorporate both moves. So I'm moving, I'm giving a little extra push. I'm flipping it down to the floor and dumping it on the ground, and I'm tossing it back into my mouth. Boom, boom. I'm using some of this to get more momentum on the liquid in the cup. versus simply tipping it over and tipping it back. I'm flinging it from here a little bit, but these two things have combined. They're coordinated. When I go down, I flip down with my wrist. Not really my wrist, but it's really a twist from in here. When I come back, I'm flipping back. And if we do that, basically staying put, the arm is moving this way just ever so slightly, powered from here. The whole power comes from this move, but the range of motion comes from this, is the range of motion I'm going through. It's powered by this. Now, that's producing sort of a crude, wide vibrato, but I like to start, in some cases, with the widest range of motion, just so we feel what the amount of room we have to move. In other cases, I've had students where their vibrato is too loosey-goosey, it's kind of out of control. For a student like that, I might tighten it down and say, let's just make it measured, slow, and not that wide, you know? And we're going to grow it from there. That would be another strategy, you know? Some things work for different people. I've literally been working vibrato with the same student for a year or more, and then one day you say something and it just clicks in. I had a student the other day finally getting it, sort of. Used to have a little bit of one of these, like a hand vibrato kind of thing. It would be kind of tight, and I was telling him the same stuff I've just gone over, and you know, to me, it's that I'm moving, I'm opening and closing my elbow. Well, what's moving when I open and close my elbow? Well, my forearm is moving, of course, but I never said it that way. I just kept telling the student, keep opening and closing the elbow, right? And then something clicked on one finger or another, and then the move was happening in the right way, and I was like, what are you doing? In your mind, what are you doing? It's like, oh, I'm doing it with my forearm, or I'm moving my forearm. Okay, think about that then, because that gets you to do the right thing somehow. So anyhow, a few other things to talk about with the vibrato is what part of your finger are you putting down on the instrument here? On the string? Are we on the fleshy? There's a whole range of vibratos. So am I laying my finger pad down on the string like nice and flat, kind of in the center of my finger pad? Or am I up on the tip of my finger like I would be when I'm playing quickly? Right? Am I in this posture, or am I more in like a flatter fingered, fleshier posture? And there's a range of sound you're going to get here as well. So here's a little leaner finger happening, okay? On the tip of the finger. This actually allows me a bigger swing in many ways, because it gets me a little more into the cello this way, right? Bit more bent finger, and that kind of gives me this range here. Versus if I get more finger pad down on the cello, I don't have to move as much, because the finger is like essentially wider now, right? I don't have to do this anymore to get a wide vibrato, and there's anything in between, of course. So when it comes to you know, I didn't learn my vibrato in a measured way with a metronome, but for students that have trouble with the stops and starts and the it kind of goes in and out at different parts of it. They might start out well on a note, and then if they think of going to another note, it might tighten down or something, right? So we may need to resort to actually measuring the vibrato out with a metronome. And that would be sort of counting every waver to a click. So here I am at 72. I'm going up with the beat and back, up, back, up, back, up, back, okay? I'm also trying to use my full bow here. I'm measuring out a comfortable bow speed. I don't want this kind of sound when I'm learning vibrato. I want a dense sound with a slow bow, you know? So I'm finding 4 clicks at this speed is quite comfortable for me here. So I'm going to organize it in that way. You shouldn't randomly be vibrating to the click. The bow shouldn't just randomly be changing. You should try to organize it in some way. So I've decided 4 clicks per bow here. And there's 2 things I could do. I could either change the speed of my vibrato to the click, or I could move the click faster. The first thing would look like this. Maybe I'll go into a triplet instead of wow, wow. How about wow, 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 wow. That can get a little tricky. I could just go straight into, like, I guess 16th notes we'd call it. Wow, 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 wow. I'm doing 2 oscillations instead of just 1 per click. Instead of wee-oo, wee-oo, it's wee-oo, 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 right? And again, I never did learn vibrato that way myself. I was lucky enough to have some natural ability with it. But for those students who have a difficulty with it initially, or have been allowed to play with a weird vibrato that they're now totally used to, you're going to have to break yourself on that habit. Never go any faster than you can control the vibrato, and it might take weeks of this. And you know, what'll happen usually with these students, I've noticed, is, all right, let's get faster, fine, okay? All right, I can do that, and then there'll be a point where this starts to happen. They'll lose control of it, yeah? And it'll just go into sort of a spaz. If that's happening, back down the metronome. You can't go that fast, and you can only go as fast as you can control it. I would also recommend removing your vibrato to whatever extent possible from anything you're playing, so you're not reinforcing that bad habit. It's just basically destroying your progress in the other direction. So, yeah, talk a little bit about vibrato in the higher registers. I like to pull back against my thumb. I actually put my thumb down, you know, for in standard thumb position on the harmonics here. I'm planting my thumb roughly a whole step behind my first finger. As we get up higher, or even here, if your hand's a little bigger, moving your thumb back a little bit can sometimes give you some better, like, leverage to pull against. If you're too tight here inside, like small hand between thumb and 3, it can get a little tippy or weird or something. If you get back here, it kind of braces you nicely. I have equal amounts of weight on my thumb and my 3rd finger in this instance, okay? Kind of pulling back almost, it feels like. Other versions of this high vibrato that I've seen, sometimes no thumb, maybe a few fingers down, maybe even flat fingered. You look at Dupre, you look at Yo-Yo Ma. Up in the high registers, these are soloists, of course, so they're really trying to let it rip with that vibrato in the high register, right? That kind of sound, like very high energy. It's not really a sound you'd use in an orchestra setting as a section player. But yeah, I've seen, just to get more range of motion, they're sort of stabilizing by planting all 3 fingers down. Versus thumb and a single finger like 3. This gives us a little bit more of a traditional restrained sound with a thumb and 3 down. versus this kind of thing. That's kind of got that out of control sort of screaming, almost an electric guitar kind of vibrato. It kind of goes over the pitch a little bit. And that can sound good in certain music. Shostakovich, for example. Maybe Dvorak, right? Probably not Bach. Okay, so we covered a little bit of high register stuff. As we get a little better, we might be expected to continuously vibrate between notes. And this gets very difficult, even if you're not shifting from note to note. There can be quite a radical balance change in the hand to go, especially from like 1 to 4. That's going to be the biggest balance change you're going to see. If we're just in our normal tapping balance, meaning we're not concerned with the vibrato, we're concerned with just sort of sitting on top of our position and just typing, basically, right? That's just sort of this action, right? We're not favoring one finger or another. We're kind of just splitting the difference and just setting up shop and just pounding some notes out, right? Shifting occasionally, right? Fast. Vibrato, that all goes out the window. Every note is its own position, really. You have to fully commit to the best possible vibrato position. That might involve releasing the thumb, might involve releasing all the other fingers. It might involve tucking your hand in almost like a fist shape for the first. That's complete disregard for the fact that we're going to play another note sometime soon. But you have to get good at popping from one balance to another, right? If I'm not committing, I have to split the difference, and I wind up with a crummy vibrato on maybe both 1 and 4, let's say. So here, I'm balanced right over both of these notes. I'm just going to sit in this balance and do my best here. It's about the best I can get, and on my first finger, very thin sound. It's very limited in its range of motion if I'm not willing to do a full commit to each note. And you'll have to discover the posture for each finger. Now each finger in each position is actually a little, really every finger on every point on the cello is kind of a different vibrato. The principles oftentimes remain the same, although some are pretty radically different, especially when you consider you have to deal with this part of the instrument. You know, as your hand opens up, your thumb stays back. That feels a lot different than a third finger vibrato where my thumb is basically behind my hand, you know? So, also if you're one of those students who's having a lot of trouble getting any good vibrato on any note, go find your best note on the instrument, your best finger on the best note, whatever that note is for you, and figure out what your arm and you know, arm, forearm, whether, you know, is this happening, is this how, what is it that's good about that? Why is it working? And can you apply that to other fingers? So another thing I want to talk about is the angle of your arm and hand relative to the strings. If I really square up against the instrument, like very perpendicular, right? I'm kind of taking my shoulders and I'm squaring as much as I can. My head is being pretty much dragged into the instrument here. And I'm getting my elbow around. That's going to give me a nice square, right down the runway kind of move here. And it's going to give me also the ability to flip a little bit more this way with a rotation. That's going to look something like this. Versus, and again, everything in between is possible. This is the other extreme, would be if I were playing on the A and D string, for example. I'm going to take my shoulders, I'm going to point them off at about 45 degrees. And, you know, see a lot of cellists play this way, especially on the A string. Better leverage here, and the bow as well. Things get closer, right? There you go. Think of Dvorak Concerto, for instance, yeah? In this version, my fingers become more parallel to the strings, right? And it really, like, I'm almost tempted here to, like, just release my thumb in this version, and I'm really, my finger is maximum pad on the string in this version, because the diagonal is going through, the string is coming through my finger at that diagonal, so I get a lot of flesh down on the string. And that way I don't have to do a huge swing necessarily. And I'm almost just pulling back on the cello in this version. And my thumb, sure, it might be touching, it might not. So that would be another extreme. Moving around, even subtle movements with the frame of your body can open up a whole range of motion that might not have been possible. Like if you're down here and you're not getting around to the C string, for instance. Let's say I kept this A string posture, and I just moved to the C string down here in 4th position, right? I'm literally limited here by the side of the instrument unless I come up and around, get over here, and this is the way I'm going to get a good swing on this note, right? I've heard some ideas about transferring from note to note where people like to intellectualize which waver they're sort of... I've never thought about that specifically. I think your body kind of takes care of that if you're just considering, I'm not going to stop doing that motion until the very end of the note. Hopefully it just kind of takes care of itself, but if you're thinking of throwing from one finger to the next, that could help too, and it might even just cause you to do it that way. Let's see. Speed and width, and as it pertains to bow speed and the density of your sound. Let's say the two different extremes for the sound you're getting are more of an on the bridge type sound, right? Versus a fluffier sound near the fingerboard with more bow speed. Different vibratos interact differently with those sort of sound colors with the bow, right? So, you know, it's more kind of piercing sound. And register is a factor too, of course. Are we down low, are we up high? But let's say right here. With that dense sound, it's almost like a magnifying glass on the vibrato. I can really hear every waver here. I can be slow and wide with this type of sound. I can be quicker as well. Sort of a certain kind of intensity to that. Let's say I have a faster, fluffier type bow speed here. I've always been a fan of sort of a fast vibrato. Hopefully not a tight vibrato. I never liked that sound, but if it's wide enough but kind of quick, with a fast bow, it makes a really nice kind of like soft lens type sound. Like a special type of sound. I can also have a relaxed kind of slow vibrato with this kind of sound, and it creates another attitude. matches the bow. There's something interesting about this sound, I think. I'm drawn to it because there's some sort of like, there's a little fire in it and there's a little ice in it as well, right? There's sort of a juxtaposition in that sound, and I like to use it in certain like special type spots in a sonata or a concerto or whatever. So you can sort of mix and match.